Hey everyone, this is Nadia. Today I'm taking you over together with me to a very special and important event for me. I'm having a book club organized where we will be discussing my own book. So for context, for those who don't know, who are new to this channel, my name is Nadia. I am a software engineer working in and living in London, and a few years ago I wrote and published my own book where I tell the story of how I taught myself to code and how I started building a career in tech. So today we are having a book club organized at Code Your Future, which is a London charity that teaches refugees and people from various disadvantaged backgrounds to program. So it's very exciting. I will meet students who study there, who read my book. They will ask me questions. I will hopefully record it and share my impressions about how it went with you later.
I think in the beginning of your book, you said that by learning to code, it has completely turned you into a whole new person. You become resourceful, independent, resilient, confident in your abilities. And can you explain more how, I think, is it coding a different thing? Because it kind of not happens so commonly that learning a skill change the personality of the learner.
Yeah, that's a good question. So do you mind if I turn the camera so that we are both in frame? I just realized that it's strange. So how did this change me as a person? I think that learning to code changes the way you think a lot. So it teaches you to think in a more structured and logical way. So what happens is that people who learn to code, they often notice that they actually start approaching things differently. So one example that I've heard of people is that when they start to learn to code, they start to clean their apartment in a different way. So they maybe before that they were just cleaning it in a very random way. You clean one part of the room, then you clean the dust, then you do something else. But then once you start to code, you're a little bit more analytical and you're okay, so what would be the best first step in cleaning the room? What would make most sense? So if I first clean the floor and then I clean the surfaces, for instance, it's not very logical because something might come off, dust can come from the surface to the floor, and then I will have to clean the floor again, which doesn't make sense. So it's kind of a silly example of something practical that happens to people, what I've heard. Also, sometimes you just start thinking in a little bit more structured way, or becoming maybe more logical in how you make decisions, more analytical. So for instance, people have noticed that it's become harder to argue with me, because when somebody says something and I'm okay, but this doesn't make logical sense. You just now, you said something different before, and I become very good at pointing people, there are logical errors in their reasoning, which people don't really appreciate. But that's one thing, and it just, I think, rewires your brain and teaches you to be maybe think maybe less based on emotions, but more based on logic and facts and reasoning. Also, it teaches you personal things like patience, resilience, and personal traits that you need as a software engineer, because you do need to be very patient. I think that without patience, you just won't be able to make it as a programmer. So I think that it taught me to be more patient than I used to be. Maybe just generally a little bit calmer as a person, because in programming, if you overreact to things breaking and not working, then it will be very difficult journey for you, because things break all the time, and you'll be frustrated and angry all the time. So I think programming teaches you to be a little bit less emotional and kind of dealing with emotions better. That's at least what I've experienced. I think one of the things.
Do you have any advice for the first-time learner that what would you do differently so that you probably won't give up for the first time you try?
I think that you need to understand. I need to have some idea of why you're learning this skill, right? So you need to have a goal. So there can be different goals. I think some people say that you need to be super passionate about programming and you need to have like a great idea of a startup that you want to build or like a life-changing tool that you want to program. I think that it's a little bit unrealistic to expect everybody to have those ideas or those like projects that people want to build, because a lot of people like me, for instance, grow up in circumstances where they don't have any connection to technology and there is no space for them to come up with those ideas. Like not everybody is growing up in like Palo Alto and like building computers in their garage, right? Like I didn't have a garage or any kind of environment for that. So it can be a very practical goal, like just getting a good job and being able to provide for a family. I think it's a perfectly fine goal. We don't need to, like, it doesn't have to be idealistic. It can be very pragmatic. So you need to understand like why you're learning it. Also, you might want to like just build a website for yourself or for your friends or for your like shop, for instance, if you're a business person. But it needs to be something concrete at least. And then this will help you not to give up, because you will know like. So in programming, we talk about definition of done very often. So like if you have a task, like they might ask you, what is the definition of done? When can we look at the task and see that it's delivered? So it's helpful to have this definition of done with coding as well. So like when will you say that you'll learn the skill? So for instance, when you say like when I got my internship, or when I got this website shipped to production, or when I got this page built in my local environment or whatever. And just have a goal that is realistic. I think that like getting a job is a little bit kind of further down the line, but still it's a good goal to have. So yeah, I think if you're learning to code, I think it's important to have like some goal that you have in front of you. It can be anything. It will help to not give up. And also it's helpful to have a circle of support. So I think that you're learning with Code Your Future. So you already have this kind of support group around you, fellow students, teachers. Also, everybody has buddy, right? So this is very helpful. Like I didn't really have like a formal support structure, so it was challenging to do it kind of on my own. And I think it's possible to do it, but also you need to be like very self-motivated to continue doing it. Yeah, so having people who support you, I think, is something very important. So what would you do differently? Yeah, so like starting to learn something without having a goal, I think it's just not really whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that. And then another thing is that I would start building like personal projects or like concrete things earlier. I think a lot of people get stuck in like tutorials, and I did as well. But also tutorials are, they're very deceptive, because you think that you know stuff, but you're just repeating what the instructor is saying. Mm. So it's very easy to, I don't know if you have experienced that, like you're doing a tutorial and you feel that you understand everything, and it's great. But then when you need to do the same thing yourself, you don't remember.
Completely lost.
Yes. So that's what happened to me a lot of times. And I think the earlier you start doing things on your own, the better. You will learn some like much quicker. Just doing things on your own, just like even if it's very slow and like very, very painful, and you have to Google like every little line, it's much better than doing tutorials, all over. So that's I think also kind of a mistake.
And I guess one thing that distinguishes like us as career changers compared to those CS graduates is that they determine to be programmer at a younger age, and they see their career as a linear progression. And for us and most of the people in Code Your Future is not like that. You kind of have to change the direction of your life. And I think you put it really well in your book, saying that failing at something very important shattered what self-esteem I had before that. And I guess everyone has the experience of failing in something, whether it's career or relationship, and that's why we had the idea of do something different. But how difficult it is to convince yourself after you have a failing experience and tell yourself you can do something challenging like coding.
It is very difficult, so I'm not going to lie. So I think the period that I described in my book, so kind of between like we closed down the magazine and then I started learning to code, was very, very dark. So like just a period when I didn't like I was super depressed and didn't know what else, what's next. But then when you're starting to learn to code, if you have like concrete goals in front of you, you can basically you need to be too busy to worry about like whether you're good or not. Like if you like, I didn't have much of a choice. Like I didn't know what else to do, so this was kind of my only hope. So and I thought that, you know, I would do whatever it takes to get there. And then I think when you get your first job, this is a very like important moment for everybody, like a job or internship. It can be like an unpaid internship. This is when you think that finally, you know, if somebody hires you or gets you to work, you know, with them in a professional setting, it means that maybe you are not like a complete failure, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you know something. They wouldn't hire you if you didn't know anything, right? They see maybe you actually know very little, but they see potential. And this is, you know, moment when you will just feel much better about yourself.
Yeah.
But then the job starts, and then I think what's important is to try to focus on, you know, the principle of it. So if you are learning about HTML, you just need to understand that like the principle is that there are tags that represent concepts on the web page, and try to think of which tag, like more like which categories of tags exist, but you don't need to remember all of them, and then you'll be able to Google them. And the same with CSS, like just the general idea of what CSS is and what it does. And the same with JavaScript as well, like with any framework as well with React, like try to think of like what is the concept here, what is the principle. You don't need to remember the syntax exactly. You'll be able to Google it and like remember it eventually. I think that sometimes people try to remember stuff by heart and they don't understand the principle, and then like it's not going anywhere.
You know, being a programmer, you know, the more you do it, the more you work in the field. Does it become easier?
In certain ways, yes. In certain ways, it becomes difficult because especially if you change jobs, because then you have a lot like a new everything is new again. If you change technology that you use, a lot of people switch like programming languages, so they work coding in like Python, Java, and then go to Python or whatever. Then you have to learn new things, but some things become easier because you learn a lot of things are applicable. You learn them in one language and then you can apply them to another language. So I've heard like people that they are able to, you know, pick up languages very quickly if they need to change stack. So it does become easier. Also, of course, you remember more stuff, and I think at every job you get into the point when you are comfortable enough, and then you can have some time when things are like not easy, because like they won't be. I don't think they ever are easy, because this wouldn't be such a high-paid job if this was like an easy job and you can just learn it and then do it. There will always be new things that you need to learn, new problems. Like you need to implement the feature. But like nobody tells you how to do this, right? You need to understand yourself.
What?
A feature, for instance,
a feature.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody tells you how to do this, right? Yeah. You need to figure this out yourself, and this is difficult. You need to be creative always.
So no one will be holding your hands.
Yeah, well, like when you stop being a junior, then like you are kind of expected to do things independently. You can cooperate and ask others for their input. But still, the expectation is that once you are promoted from junior to mid-level, you are supposed to do this on your own. And then when you're a senior, then you would be making decisions for kind of the team. And, it's the expectations, they grow as you grow, I would say. And then when you're like a staff engineer, you're a principal engineer, which are like higher levels. You're just... Like I look at in my current company at staff engineers and the expectations of them, and it's also pretty intense. Like the stuff that they need to do, they need to be responsible for like a strategy for a couple of teams, and they need to understand like what this group of developers, like 30 developers, what they will be working on, and they need to kind of make those decisions from a very high level. So they need to understand the system so well that they will be like, okay, we can change this whole thing, and then this will still work. And you need to, in certain ways it's more complex, because you need to make decisions without knowing everything. So there is a lot of unknowns. So yeah, I think it's a very scary answer. But I think realistically you will always be growing, and then like usually people choose whether they go into a technical track or managerial track. So you can either go to this like staff and principal engineer or an architect, or into management. And if you go into...
What is architect?
An architect it depends on the company as well, but usually it's somebody who is kind of driving from, like, if it's a big company, a big product, for instance, it has a lot of code in it. It has maybe like different, the code might be like divided into separate kind of things, like microservices they're called, or basically it's a very big code base. And there needs to be somebody who is overlooking kind of the whole thing, like an architect of a building, and this is like an architect of the code base. So they are thinking of whether maybe this should be moved to a new kind of new database, for instance, or a new language, programming language. You know, they may be making those decisions that maybe this programming language doesn't work anymore for this system, and we need to migrate to a new programming language or something like that. So like higher level decisions about the about how this product is built in terms of engineering. So there are engineers, but kind of working a little bit above the implementation details, so to say. So it's difficult to describe without like going into too much like technical details, but it's kind of I think a role for a very experienced engineer, I would say. But other people go into management, and then they're like it's a different job basically. So you start kind of from scratch there. Not from scratch because you have your experience, but but overall, basically, like programming will get in certain ways it will get easier. Like you will remember things that you now don't remember yet. So the event ended. I think it went pretty well. We had 5 people join over Zoom, and I think we had 5 people join in person. So it was a pretty good turnaround for the format, for the book club. So it felt really good to meet some of the students in person and get to chat to them. It was a pretty informal discussion. There were a lot of questions about my book, but also just general questions from people who are just now learning to code. People ask me what kind of character traits you need to be a programmer. They asked me about the difficulties that I faced. There were questions about finding your first job and things around how do you stand out from the crowd if you are, one of hundreds of applicants and other people, for instance, have computer science degrees or have commercial experience. So what do you do to actually stand out, and what do you do to convince somebody to hire you over others? So some good questions, and for me it was pretty inspiring because I know now what worries people who are on this journey and what information they're missing, what guidance they need. And hopefully it was also inspiring for them because they saw somebody who made the career switch and made the same, made the career switch that they're now trying to make. And they can see a real example of a person who did the same thing and who is successful. So overall, I like the experience a lot. I think that there is a lot of value in talking to people who are very early in their career journey. And also, it's very valuable for people who are just learning to code. It's very valuable for them to meet new people, who have been in the industry for a while, especially people who are also self-taught or from kind of non-traditional backgrounds. So yeah, if you are now learning to code, try to reach out to people who have more experience. Try to talk to them. Also, if you are organizing courses for developers, try to think of ways to get them to meet people who are in the industry. I think seeing people who have already made this switch and made this journey can be really inspiring for them. And who knows, maybe just talking to you helps someone stay on the course and continue learning. That's at least my hope, that people who meet me, who interact with me, get inspired, and they get inspired enough to not give up and continue learning. Yeah, so it was a pretty cool day. Let me know how you're doing, how your learning to code is going, whether you have any questions about any of this. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.